Our story begins in silence, not the silence of night, but something deeper, something ancient, a stillness that lingers beneath the world, far below the lands between, where light struggles to reach, and where time itself feels forgotten. Down there, in the hidden depths, lies a place known only as the Lake of Rot, a vast unmoving sea of scarlet decay. It does not ripple, it does not breathe, it simply exists. And yet, this place is not the origin of the rot. It is only its prison, because the Scarlet Rot is not merely a sickness. It is not a plague, not a curse, not something that can be healed or cured. The Scarlet Rot is something far older, something divine, long before the fall of Caelid, before the name of Malenia was ever spoken. There were those who worshipped it. Deep within the rot, we find strange remnants of a forgotten age, mushrooms growing in unnatural forms, twisting upward like crowns, ancient garments worn not by kings, but by devotees. These were not survivors. They were believers. They did not fear the rot. They embraced it. To them, it was not decay. It was transformation, because the Scarlet Rot does not simply destroy. It changes. It breaks the body, only to reshape it into something new. A cycle, decay, followed by rebirth. And this cycle was not accidental. It was the will of something greater, an outer God, far beyond the understanding of mortals, beyond even the earth tree. There exist beings, without form, without limit, who impose their vision upon the world. And the Scarlet Rot is one such vision, a force that seeks not order, but dissolution, not life, but a different kind of life. Even creatures that should be untouched are not spared. The crystallians, beings of living stone, perfect and unchanging, even they can rot, their bodies fracture, their forms distort, and yet they continue to move, because this is not death, not truly. It is something else, something in between, a sacred decay. And in the depths of the rot, there is a relic, a blade, small, curved, and gleaming with scarlet light, the scorpion's stinger, a ceremonial weapon, not meant for war, but for ritual, because long ago there were ceremonies where the rot was not feared, but gifted, passed from one being to another, a blessing, and the blade itself is no ordinary weapon. It is said to be fashioned from the remains of a god of rot, and so we are left with a haunting image, not of something abstract or distant, but something physical, something that once existed in a form we might almost recognize, a creature like a great scorpion, ancient, silent, and buried beneath the world. But even gods can be challenged. Long ago, there came a warrior, a figure lost to time, known only as the blind swordsman. He did not see the world as others did, but he understood something that others could not. That rot thrives in stillness, and that to oppose it, one must become like water, flowing, ever moving, never stagnant. It is said that he was guided by a mysterious being, a presence known only as the Blue Dancer, a spirit of flowing water, gentle yet unstoppable. And from this being, he was gifted a blade, a sword that moved like a river. With it, he did the impossible. He did not destroy the rot. No, such a thing cannot be destroyed. Instead, he sealed it, buried deep beneath the earth, where it could no longer spread, or so it seemed, because even in silence, even in darkness, the rot endures, waiting, and eventually it found a new vessel, not in some forgotten ruin, but in a child, a demigod. Her name was Malenia. Her name was Malenia, a child of divine lineage, born of the same sacred blood that shaped the lands between. And yet, from the very moment she first drew breath, something was wrong. There was no single wound, no visible mark, no sign that could be easily understood, only a quiet creeping presence. The Scarlet Rot. It did not come for her later in life. It did not spread from some distant land. It was already there, inside her, a part of her as natural as her own heartbeat. And so, while other demigods rose in strength, while they claimed power, while they shaped kingdoms and waged war, Malenia endured, her body slowly betraying her, flesh decaying, limbs failing, sight fading, each day a quiet battle, not against an enemy, but against herself. And yet, she did not break, because Malenia was not alone. At her side, there was another, her twin, Miquella, a child like her, yet untouched by rot. Where Malenia was decay, Miquella was unchanging, cursed in a different way. For while Malenia's body withered, Miquella's never grew, forever young, forever incomplete, two halves of something that could never be whole. And yet, between them, there was something rare, not ambition, not power, but compassion. Miquella saw the suffering within his sister, not as weakness, but as something to be understood, something to be healed. And so, he searched, not for weapons, not for conquest, but for a way to free Malenia. From the rot, he turned away, from the golden order, from its rigid laws, its perfect logic, its promise of control, because the golden order could not help her. It had no answer for something so ancient, something so foreign. And so Miquella began to create something new, a different path, a sanctuary, far from the Erdtree, far from the gaze of the greater will, a place where those abandoned could find refuge, where the broken The cursed, the forgotten, could exist without judgment. This place would come to be known as the Halig tree, a tree unlike any other, not born of divine command, but of intention, grown slowly, carefully, with hope, and at its heart, Malenia remained, guarding it, protecting it, not as a ruler, but as a blade, because though her body was frail, though the rot continued its quiet work, Malenia was still a warrior, trained in a way unlike any other. Her movements, flowing, graceful, like water, echoes of a forgotten master, the blind swordsman, though she had never met him. His teachings endured, passed down through time, through motion, through the very act of combat. And so, Malenia fought, not with brute force, but with precision, each strike measured, each movement inevitable, a dance, beautiful and terrible, but even she could not escape what lived within her. The rot was patient. It did not rush. It did not need to, because it was not trying to kill her. It was waiting, waiting for the moment when it could bloom, and that moment would come in a war that would break the world, a war between demigods, a war born from the shattering of order itself, the shattering when the Elden Ring was broken and the lands between fell into chaos. Each demigod sought power, each sought dominion, and among them there was one who would stand against Malenia, a warrior of unmatched strength, General Radon, a conqueror of stars, a being who held the very heavens in place. And when their paths crossed, there could be no peace, only battle, a clash that would echo across the land, a moment where two forces, equally unyielding, would collide, steel against gravity, will against will, and beneath it all, something far more dangerous began to stir, because for the first time, Malenia would face something she could not simply overcome. And in that moment of desperation, of exhaustion, of inevitability, she let go. She allowed it to bloom. The battlefield was vast, an open expanse beneath a silent sky, where the wind carried dust, and the earth bore the scars of countless wars. This was Caelid, once a land of life, now something else entirely. But before its fall, before the rot consumed it, it was here that two legends met. Malenia, blade of Miquella, and Radon, the Starscore. He stood like a force of nature, towering, unyielding, his presence alone enough to bend the will of lesser warriors. The ground trembled beneath him, not from footsteps, but from gravity itself, because Radon did not simply fight. He commanded the very laws of the world, holding the stars in place, halting their movement, defying the natural order. And yet, before Malenia, even he would be tested. She moved with silence, no wasted motion, no hesitation, each step deliberate, each breath controlled, her blade an extension of her will. The two did not speak. There was no need, because some battles are beyond words. And then they clashed. Steel met steel. Speed met power. Precision met overwhelming force. Radon's strikes shattered the earth, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. But Malenia flowed around them, like water, untouchable, unpredictable, endless. She cut him again and again, each strike drawing blood, each movement flawless. And yet, Radon did not fall, because he was more than a warrior. He was a force that refused to yield. He endured. He adapted. He pressed forward. And slowly, the battle changed, because no matter how perfect her technique, no matter how precise her blade, Malenia's body was failing. The rot within her stirred, not in response to the battle, but to its inevitability. She could not win, not like this, not without giving in. And Radon would not stop, even wounded, even bleeding. He advanced, relentless, unstoppable, a storm that would consume everything in its path. And so, in that moment, when defeat stood before her, clear and certain, Malenia made a choice, not as a warrior, but as a vessel. She let go. She released what she had held back for her entire life. The Scarlet Rot, unbound, it did not erupt in chaos. It unfolded, slowly, beautifully, like a flower, blooming from her very being. Scarlet petals spread outward, carried by an unseen wind. The air itself changed, thick, heavy, alive. The ground beneath them began to wither. Color drained, life faded, replaced by something unnatural, something eternal. Radon stood at the center of it, unmoving, as the bloom reached him, as the rot embraced him, as the world itself seemed to collapse into silence. And then everything ended, not with a final strike, not with a cry, but with stillness. When the bloom faded, when the air settled, when the last fragments of scarlet drifted to the ground, nothing remained of what once was. Caelid was no longer a battlefield. It had become a grave, a land consumed, not by fire, not by war, but by rot, endless, unforgiving, alive, and at its heart, Radon still stood, but he was no longer the same. The rot had taken him, not his strength, not his body, but his mind, the great general, the master of gravity, the one who held back the stars, was reduced to something wandering, something lost. He roamed the wasteland, endlessly, feeding on the fallen, driven not by purpose, but by instinct, a shadow of what he once was. And Malenia, she did not remain. After the bloom, after the destruction, she was carried away, unconscious, broken, changed, taken back to the halig tree where she would rest, where she would wait. But the world would never forget what happened there, because the bloom was not just an event. It was a revelation, a truth that could no longer be denied. The Scarlet Rot was never meant to be contained. It was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to bloom. After the bloom, there was no victory, no triumph, no sense of an ending, only silence, the kind that lingers after something irreversible has taken place. Caelid remained, but not as it once was. The land itself had changed. The soil turned to scarlet decay, the air thick with unseen poison, the sky forever dimmed. Creatures that once lived now wandered in twisted forms, neither alive nor truly dead. Everything touched by the rot, everything reshaped, and at the center of it all, Radon endured, a legend reduced to instinct, his once brilliant mind lost beneath the weight of the rot. Yet his body remained strong, unyielding, as if refusing to accept what had become of him. He wandered endlessly across the wasteland, drawn to battle, to movement, to anything that resembled the life he once knew, because somewhere deep within him, something still lingered, a fragment of who he used to be. But it was fading, slowly, inevitably, and far from that ruined land. Beyond the scarlet horizon, the halig tree stood, untouched, at least on the surface. Its branches stretched wide, its form elegant, almost peaceful, a sanctuary, just as Miquella intended, a place removed from the chaos of the world, where those cast aside could exist without fear. But even here, the rot had followed, not as violently, not as openly, but quietly, subtly, like a whisper beneath the surface, because Malenia had returned, and with her, the rot. She rested at the base of the halig tree, hidden away, deep within its core, guarded not by walls, but by presence, by the weight of what she had become. No longer just a warrior, no longer just a vessel, but something closer to the divine, because the bloom had changed her. The Scarlet Rot had not simply been released. It had taken root, fully, completely, transforming her into something that existed between states, between control and surrender, between self and something greater. And still, she waited, not in fear, not in regret, but in stillness, as if listening for something or someone, because Miquella was gone, taken, before his work could be finished, before the halig tree could truly become what he envisioned. His absence lingered in every corner of that place, In the quiet halls, in the unmoving branches, in the still air, everything felt incomplete, as though the world itself had paused, waiting for something that would never return. And yet, the Haligtree endured, not perfect, not untouched, but standing, a fragile symbol of a different path, one that was never fully realized, one that may never be. And beneath it all, Malenia remained, unmoving, unchanging, but not gone, because within her, the rot still stirred, not violently, not yet, but patiently, as it always had, waiting for the moment when it would be needed again, or perhaps for the moment when it would no longer be resisted, because the truth had already been revealed. The rot cannot be stopped. It cannot be cured. It cannot be undone. It can only be delayed, contained, endured, until the moment it blooms again. In the quiet that followed, nothing truly ended. The rot did not vanish. The scars did not heal. The world simply continued, slowly, gently, as though afraid to disturb what had already been broken. Deep within the Haligtree, Malenia remains, not as the warrior she once was, not fully as the goddess she became, but something in between, a presence suspended. Her body rests, unmoving, yet within her, the rot still breathes, not violently, not uncontrollably, but patiently, waiting, because the Scarlet Rot is not chaos. It is not ray. It is not destruction without purpose. It is a cycle, a quiet, inevitable turning. Decay, followed by transformation, and followed by something new. And Malenia is its vessel, not by choice, but by fate, a fate she resisted for so long, holding it back, containing it, enduring it, until the moment she could no longer do so. And when she finally let go, the world changed, not just the land, not just Caelid, but something deeper, something unseen, because when the rot bloomed, it revealed a truth that even the divine can fracture, even the strongest can fall, even order itself can give way to something older, something quieter, something that does not seek to rule, but simply to exist. And somewhere beyond the Haligtree, beyond the broken lands, Miquella's dream still lingers, a world untouched by suffering, a place where those cast aside, the broken, the cursed, might finally rest. But dreams are fragile things, and Miquella is no longer there to protect it, taken before his work could be complete, leaving behind only echoes and a tree that continues to grow without its creator. And so the Haligtree stands, not as a triumph, but as a question, a quiet reminder of what could have been and what was lost, far away in the scarred remains of Caelid. Radon still wanders, endless, unyielding, a warrior who cannot die and cannot remember why he fights. the stars above him, still frozen in place, as though time itself refuses to move forward, as though the world is waiting for something unresolved. And beneath it all, beneath the silence, beneath the stillness, the rot remains, not spreading, not fading, simply waiting, because what it represents cannot be erased. It is part of the world, part of its balance, a force that does not seek control, but chain, and perhaps, in some distant future, it will bloom again, not as destruction, but as transformation, something new, something unknown. Until then, the lands between sleep, resting in a fragile stillness, caught between order and decay, between what was and what will be, and in that quiet space where nothing truly ends and nothing truly begins, the story of Malenia continues. And now, as the world grows quiet and the stars remain still, you may rest. Let the story fade like a distant memory and drift into sleep.